Hello, everybody. This is our third talk in our podcast. We are doing the rising sign, the ascendant, and the ascendant ruler. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Doing well.
It's
Awesome.
kind of weird asking that because we already like talked to like a lot before. It's
Yeah,
like the formalities of like a podcast, I guess.
Yes, yes.
we're better.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, so we're talking about the rising sign, the ascendant, and the ascendant ruler. First, I kind of wanted to like lay the foundation of like what these things are for like whoever's listening and they just don't know the difference between the three because I feel like these get used interchangeably incorrectly sometimes. Not saying that I'm perfect by any means, but I think that's kind of like what it's developed into. But the ascendant, so the sign that was coming up over the eastern horizon at the time of birth is called the rising sign of the chart, and the exact degree of that sign is called the ascendant. The ascendant ruler is the ruling planet of the ascendant, or you could just say it's the ruler of the first house. The ascendant is determined by the exact time of birth and is one of the most sensitive, important points in the chart. The ascendant is an astronomical point, not a planet. I think that's really important. The ascendant is the point in the sky where everything becomes visible. The ascendant is the literal start of the day. I think that's pretty cool. And it changes every hour, 2 hours, which makes it a lot more personal than the other parts of the chart. And I got a lot of this information from Adam, Chris Brennan, a bunch of astrologers, their books, textbooks, lectures, whatever it may be. And I thought it described the three pretty well. So I want to ask everybody, what does the ascendant mean, and what is your interpretation of it?
All right. Well, I'm going to jump in first because I'm feeling ready to go. So for me, I am a Cancer rising. So that means that Cancer was the sign that was rising, coming up on the horizon when I was born. I'm at the very end of Cancer. So it was about to switch into Leo. Um, so I'm at 29 degrees and some minutes Cancer. And so Cancer is 29 degrees. Cancer is my ascendant. So that's how we're differentiating between those two terms. The rising sign is Cancer, which is just the sign of the first house of my chart. And then my ascendant is at 29 degrees and some minutes of Cancer. So that means in Cancer, the ruler of Cancer is the moon. So that means that the ruler of my rising or my ascendant is the moon. And so the moon has a lot of influence on me. In some traditions, your rising sign or your ascendant ruler is also considered your chart ruler, which just basically means that it has a stronger influence in your chart. That's not necessarily a Hellenistic ancient astrology tradition thing, but it's something that you will hear in other traditions. And for me, Cancer is the crab, and the crab has many aspects to it, and the biggest ones that people will notice about Cancers is the nurture nature. People are very Cancers are very nurturing. Um, but interestingly enough, the crab has to kind of pull into its shell and wants to do that too. So Cancers also have this need to kind of pull in and take breaks from all the nurture and all the being out in the world, and to bring themselves to their own nurturance, which maybe is part of the challenge for a Cancer, is to finding that balance between nurturing the world around you and nurturing yourself adequately. Um, so I feel like I have that dynamic in my own chart, and I feel like it's exaggerated even a little bit more because my moon, which is the ascendant ruler or chart ruler, is also in an exact opposition within 1 degree with my ascendant, which is, as Brett said, is an astronomical point. But the moon at the time I was born was at 28 and some minutes of Capricorn, so directly across the chart from my ascendant. And so in a lot of ways, in many traditions, that's a great thing because the I have the benefit of being in contact with the ascendant ruler in that, I can see it. I know where it is, and it can see me, and so we can support each other, and that's beautiful. Yet it does carry that little bit of tension of an opposition, So yeah, it's a support, but then it's pulling, in one direction, saying these are the needs that I need to have met, and then my ascendant, my personality, who I am as a, that's kind of, our ascendant is describing who we are as an individual and what our needs are and how we show up in the world, and maybe even how we look, and what our personality is and what our character is as an individual. And so I often find a lot of tension between um, the moon and my ascendant, because the moon is in her detriment or in her exile in Capricorn. So she's a little uncomfortable there. I feel like I've learned to live with that, and learned how to make myself comfortable in life. And it's a very Capricornian way of doing it. It's a very practical, and it's very kind of hardworking and pragmatic, and and just kind of jump right in and do it. Um, Yet I really feel the tension when it comes to this dynamic that I was talking about before of nurturing others versus nurturing myself. And that has a lot to do with the fact that the ascendant is the helm of the ship, it's first house. And then directly across the chart is the seventh house, which is all about others and one-on-one relationships and how I'm showing up in that aspect of life. So I constantly feel a kind of a push and pull between being the loving, nurturing person that I want to be to those in my life, and kind of getting overwhelmed and needing to withdraw and regroup and fill up my cup and take breaks, and so that I can then show up in the way that I want to. Um, and I can get kind of crabby if I'm not taking care of myself in that way. I mean, really, it's like, and that's something that I've noticed more as I've gotten older, and I've let myself to, like I feel like I'm allowed to not feel like I'm capable of always giving to other people. As a younger woman, and even 30s and 40s, it was harder for me to set those boundaries and feel like it was acceptable. And so I've let my crab come out a little bit more, and protect my boundaries a little bit more heartily lately. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm going today with the ascendant.
I appreciate you breaking that down, Tawa. Thanks for explaining like what the ascendant is. I think I like talked about everything, but without actually talking about like what it is. But um, with your ascendant being ruled by the moon, this is a question I have. Do you feel like because the moon moves so frequently, do you feel like you're more in tune with like the changeability of like what's just going on in life, like the flow of everything? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's a great question. I actually do feel like I would say that I have a better ability than many to kind of pivot or to just adjust according,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like I definitely have, I think what everybody has, of if I'm heading in a direction and I am anticipating something and then it doesn't happen that way, I have to give myself a minute to kind of readjust, and allow myself to feel some disappointment, and then be like, okay, now what am I doing with what's present? But I definitely have a strong capacity for just being like, okay, well, that's not happening. What could happen? How could we continue forward, basically, in a different way, based on the new circumstances? So that's a great
Adaptability.
question. Yeah, adaptability, and it
Mm,
probably does have everything to do with the fact that I feel the fluctuations much more deeply and continuously, and so
mm,
I've just been exercising that muscle for my whole life, every day. You know what I mean? So I just have learned to be like, okay, this is an adjustment that has to be made. It's not catastrophic. It's not. It doesn't have to create tension or havoc in my being. Whereas a lot of times, I think people will. kind of contract, so to speak. And when they feel things moving differently or just fluctuations, like, oh, this is a fluctuation and I don't like fluctuations. And so there's a contraction to try to stop or stabilize the fluctuation. But the universe is fluctuation, so
Hmm.
it's not really possible for us to stop it.
Absolutely.
It's really
And
fascinating, that adaptability with the Saturnian on that Saturnian end. Because that
Hmm.
does give you that ability to say, okay, change again, but no breaking down from it. It is okay, change, deal with it, pivot, right? So how do
Hmm.
we move forward from here? Which is like what you're saying, that constrict. It's funny how constriction can either constrict you and debilitate you, or it can motivate you. And yours gets kind of changed into this like forward moving force of action, right? You're like, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
that's
interesting that you brought that up, Natasha, because we were just that the moon and Saturn. I think in the last weekend wisdom, I think it was yesterday's that Alex Amorosi was on with Alexander Blair. They were just talking about how Saturn and the moon, like normally Saturn, like the sun is the reflection of the moon. So if the sun has a hard time, like with Saturn,
Mhm.
like the reflection of the moon is going to also have that hard, it's going to affect it. So that's interesting too. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
it's um it's weird because for Saturn being labeled as like something that's so rigid and um strict and like in its nature, like Saturn also gets better with time. I've heard that many times before, and I think that's really cool just from like an ascendant ruler perspective. And your ascendant ruler being the moon, it's like you're like it's almost like you're improving your ability to adapt and move within the flow of like what's going on in life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I've always kind of recognized that I thrive with structure. And so I've just kind of
Yeah.
incorporated the structure. So
Mm.
it's almost an unperceived step that I'm sure that I go through when I'm adjusting or adapting with something, because I've just always, it's like, okay, well, there's these steps that you just do, and there's this structure, and within that structure, that for me it felt like safety, I guess, probably, um, that I know that I can bounce a little bit, but I'm not gonna, completely bounce into the ethers, right? Because that structure is going to keep me here and keep me a little bit more grounded and on Earth and moving forward, which Capricorn really wants to do that, and Cancer too. Actually, they both have. I mean, the Cancer is going to move forward in a slightly more meandering fashion, possibly, but they're both big, I mean, they're both cardinal signs or tropical signs, so they're both like there's always some momentum that's trying to move you in the direction that you want to be going.
Absolutely. They're like initiatory in nature.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. They just do
You
it in
start
different ways.
Yeah. And you started this project. You started this podcast, right?
That's true. Yes.
Yeah, you know,
I have a heavily,
Hey,
heavily cardinal
hey,
chart. So,
yeah.
yeah,
It's good
but
remediation for working with, when people get scared of Saturn or scared of opposition, like a Saturnian aspect is, and like as Brett said, with time Saturn gets better. And so you've understood now, like you have to nurture your need for structure. You have to nurture your need for flexibility and malleability. And it doesn't have to be big, massive changes, but if you remediate and you give yourself a little bit of something here and there, whatever that means for you, then that opposition becomes way more productive. And I remember Adam saying something about um, that opposition. Yes, there are points of like inflections of challenge and opposing planets and ideas, but they can also be really productive. if you know how to harness it. So it's good remediation to figure out how you can appease both planets, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks. Thank you, Tala.
Yeah, thank you. Randy, do you want to go or?
You can go.
Okay. Okay. I'll go. It's a Leo moon today, so I'm gonna go with this
Oh,
Venus
boo,
aspect.
I was
yeah.
wondering how you were doing with that. How was
Yeah.
You know, actually, it's the first since our last episode on the moon. It kind of, in a way, kicked my internal butt to say you need to start paying attention to the moon cycles because I remember thinking, oh,
Nice.
somebody said pay attention. I can't do that. But I started to. I started to, and now I can kind of, I just wrote it quickly on a calendar. Okay, it's going to be a Gemini moon today. It's a Leo moon today. And it has been really interesting. And I decided even today, I'm wearing something super bright. And normally I'm just kind of in my dark, whatever, whatever color clothes, but every once in a while I like to bust out a nice bright color. And I said, well, why not on the Leo full moon? I'll work with it. Um, but going to my ascendant, why this works is that my ascendant is so my rising sign is Virgo, and so the ruler of Virgo is Mercury, and Mercury is being my ascendant ruler. It is also my chart ruler, and it is located in the 12th house. So for me, the ascendant is, this has been a very interesting journey. Like I feel like I've had to get to know who this person of Virgo is. And the irony of it is that this is who I am, and this is how I've always shown up, apparently to everybody else, and not me knowing that it's me, which
Mm.
feels very Mercury in the 12th house. Um, get to that a little bit later, but I just think it's been interesting to get to know um, the I to recognize how my identity as a Virgo shows up, and going to the ruler being Mercury. I remember in the first year in Adam's first year class, and he was talking about the characteristics of Mercury, and I was just laughing to myself because of little things that I do, and that is things like I love post-it notes. I have post-it notes everywhere, and I feel like it's a very mercurial tool because I want to take things apart. I want to analyze them. I want to compartmentalize them. And and when you start to recognize, I think when people start to learn about their rising sign and about their chart ruler or their ascendant ruler, I think it opens up a doorway of themselves that has always been there. They just never paid attention to it, never really understood um, the beautiful characteristics and maybe the not so beautiful characteristics of how, excuse me, how they walk through everyday life. And so one of the things that I just really enjoyed is that I discovered, okay, my love of post-it notes and my love of putting notes into charts. I have to put things into tables so that I can like separate the information and then look at it as a whole. Um, my ascendant is 12 degrees Virgo, and then I have Jupiter at 13 degrees Virgo. So I've gone back and forth trying to figure out how do I um, understand these two planets working together so strongly, Jupiter being on my ascendant and Mercury being my ascendant ruler. Um, and so it's definitely I can see just the example of taking a note when I'm listening to a lecture or studying, and I take all those notes down, and then I have to separate them into a chart, but I need to be able to see that chart as a whole. And I've come to understand that's how Jupiter and Mercury kind of work for me in my first house. Um, and so it's been kind of a joy and very interesting to understand your rising sign, what this sign is, and how you incarnated. When you took your first breath, that's the constellation that kind of assigned every part of you, how you physically show up, how you communicate, how you process the world. Um, and so it's been kind of it's been very interesting because I also have Saturn in my first house. So I have Jupiter, Saturn at
Oh,
25 degrees Virgo and Jupiter at 13 degrees Virgo. So I've got like this battle between the two. Jupiter wanting to go very, very big, and Saturn saying, hold your horses. No, you're not going that big. And so there's always a push and pull. And then with Mercury being in the 12th, going to this really great analogy of the being the helm of the ship. I've thought about this a lot. And we've come up with lots of different analogies of how does your chart ruler see your sign, your rising sign? How does it see the first house? And my chart ruler doesn't see my first house. And it wasn't until I saw an amazing lecture by Cassandra Tyndall that Adam had provided to us on the 12th, 8th, um, second, and fourth house. Am I getting them
hmm
mixed up? Yeah, fourth
I think
houses as
you got them.
these.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, it's
My
the
brain.
second and sixth.
Second
Yeah.
and sixth. Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. Very good. Um, and these houses that don't see the ascendant. And she defined each one of them as different ways of how that gets affected of not being able to see the ascendant. And with the 12th house, it was invisibility or lack of visibility. And that's been that, and the helm of the ship has been a really wonderful way of trying to understand how do I see Virgo and how does Virgo show up and how I don't see it and how I have a difficulty seeing those parts. So I've often thought about trying to give myself a visualization of my chart ruler being in the 12th house as being, if you're talking about the helm of the ship, it is either all the way at the back of the ship at the very dark bottom corner, still moving the ship. So it's moving that ship, it's directing it, it has no visibility, but something is steering it, right? Still don't know how to reconcile that. That, or the idea is Mercury, the ruler of my chart, is underneath and cannot see. I tried to visualize it in different ways because I feel like visualizing where your ascendant ruler is and how it can actually see it. Is it looking around the corner? Is it looking directly opposite, like what how Atawa's moon is looking at her ascendant? It can see it, but it is far away, and that's what I think about in oppositions. It's far away, and it is not in complete harmony, but it can see each other. So I think there's a lot I can say about, I think my ascendant ruler and my rising sign, but I think it's a journey that is interesting for people to go on. I think I wish more people had access to their ascendant ruler and their rising sign, and it's difficult without a birth time to do that. But I think there are ways with rectification is that you can figure that out. I think it's worth doing if you can. And I think it's a really interesting way to get to know who you are separate from your sun sign, and picking out those things. I think it's definitely easier to pick out what are the things you do on a daily basis that can be attributed to that planet. And that's been really a really fun thing for me to figure out is how mercurial am I and what are the tools I use that are very mercurial. Um, and, even showing up before we started this, this is the Virgo that shows up is I put on the pink sweatshirt for Leo, but I'm sitting here writing out all these questions and I'm saying, this is how it should flow. This is how we should do that because I want to direct and control it. And then, Tawa said, let's just let it go. I'm like, oh, okay. Mercury, go back into the 12th house and relax. And that's what Mercury needs to do. It needs to just sometimes, Mercury in domicile in Virgo is wonderful, but it's a lot. It can also be a lot. So sometimes, that Mercury in the 12th house can be a really amazing blessing to just say, you got to release and let go that analytical mind. Yeah.
I got a question for you, Natasha. Do you feel like, because I didn't know you had Saturn and Jupiter in the first house.
Mm.
Um, So do you feel like your planets in the first house, especially because they're like larger outer planets, the greater planets or whatever, do you feel like they hold more weight sometimes, or they're like more prevalent to you? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah,
Like that's
I think
very strong Virgo energy with like especially with Jupiter conjunct the ascendant. And I don't mean to like go through and break down your chart and do, but it was just interesting to
sure.
me and I was just curious.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. It's been it's like I said, it's a wild ride when you start learning this stuff about yourself. And I think it's
Hell yeah.
it is a
Shit
wild.
crazy.
That's just crazy. It is. It is so crazy. And it makes you laugh and it makes you cry and it makes you feel very relieved in a lot of ways. Um, I mean, a simple thing that when I first started, again, I go back to year one, when we first started learning this, around that time, over the last couple of years, as we've had Jupiter, Saturn, squares, right? We've had quite a few squares since the conjunction in Pluto, where, sorry, conjunction in Aquarius in 2020, right where Pluto's sitting right now. Um, my body literally did like it was like an accordion. I lost a lot of weight. I gained a lot of weight. I lost a lot of weight. I gained a lot of weight. And I even in myself, I was like, what's going on here? Like it was over the last few years, I've gone through this accordion where my body physically changed in ways that I was just astounded by. And then I learned about Jupiter and Saturn, and it's like, oh, okay, expansion, contraction. And they're there to try to teach me why those expansion and contractions are happening. Um, and it's funny, Brett, that you asked that question is that, once I learned about them, I said, okay, I can understand a whole lot more. Mercury is in the 12th, is like and with my North Node is close by and the moon is there, it is an information overload. It loves information. It's too much. And Jupiter is like, let's take that information and go. It just wants to run and inflate it and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's wonderful. Um, in a lot of ways, that's wonderful and it's very optimistic. But I have learned to, after cursing Saturn a few times, which is not good to curse Saturn, but, I have learned to really embrace and understand how why, you know, it's a terrible analogy, but it's just a description of, I think about Jupiter as the child that's on one of those terrible leashes that parents put on them. And Saturn is on the other end of that saying, no, 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 I know you're excited. I know you want to go and do this. You need to slow down. It's for your own good, you know? And I have felt that many, many times. And I'm very grateful for that. The interesting thing is those are those outer planets. And so Mars and Venus, um, they don't sit too much on the forefront of my brain. They're there, and maybe that is subconsciously I try not to look at them too much, but I definitely think they fall back into a space I don't pay attention to all that often. So it's interesting that you asked that.
Yeah.
I I think another interesting aspect of having Mercury as your ascendant ruler in this day and age, because I think that like societally we're on kind of information overload, and I mean, I think probably the average person's biggest issue is quieting the analytical mind. You know what I mean? Like all of
Mm.
our lives would have improved if we could figure out how to quiet the analytical mind. And so for you to have to be like just so ultra aware of, that there's this really strong aspect of you that wants that to be that they approach the way that you approach life, and yet you're having to constantly monitor it and juggle it and adjust it to a society that's just in information overload.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And right now with Pluto, my chart ruler, Mercury, is at 2 degrees of Leo. um, uh, in the 12th, which doesn't forget about the houses for a second, but just it is Pluto has been opposing my natal Mercury for the last year, kind of
Mm,
bit like, over the last
yeah.
year. So I use the analogy of it feeling like a blender, like a smoothie blender. I feel like right now I'm on purify but not liquefy. So, and it can be a great thing. It can be a great thing because I'm learning a lot of stuff, and I've been pushing myself to learn about emptiness and silence
Mm.
because I can feel the speed of that. Somebody went up to the blender, was like, "We need more. We need to get. We need to speed this up." And so I feel it, and so I'm like, "Okay, now I have to be proactive about dialing it back."
Yeah.
Just hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not, excuse me, everybody, they can do what they want to do, but putting a kid on a leash is crazy. When you said that, I just imagined like when I was like my parents I was fortunate to go to like Disneyland, you know what I'm saying, stuff like that growing up. And I remember there used to be kids on leashes. I was like, bro, I am so thankful I am not on a leash right now. Like this is so inhumane, in
Oh,
my opinion. I was like, that's a great
the
Natasha,
inventions that have,
you said a lot of great things, and
yeah.
as you can see, that's the only that's the only thing I took away from it is that fucking kids on leashes. That's crazy.
Oh, the human inventions. The human inventions.
No, I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's, it's just, just a way to, I think it's just talking about your mind getting away from you. I think that's something that we have to recognize sometimes is that our minds, like Thomas said, it's me and my natural being, but we are in a space right now where all of us are feeling this innate pull to bolt forward, and actually Saturn, sorry, Neptune in Aries and Saturn coming up to Neptune in Aries is going, like, when we get into that part of the year, we are going to feel that all of a sudden that pull forward. And when Uranus goes into Gemini in the spring, like later in the spring, like I think April, we're going to feel that pull forward. And I think we're all going to have to, not to use the analogy again, but to be able to think about how do we consciously tell ourselves, okay, you have to pull yourself back from listening to the news, being on social media, um, and you know, filling yourself with information that is just not going to be supportive for you, right? Sorry, that's my soapbox for
Yeah.
today.
No,
Oh,
I
you're
loved it.
good.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess because our charts are pretty similar, I'll speak about mine or my feelings on the ascendant and the rising sign, all that stuff next. But I'm also Virgo rising. My ascendant ruler is Mercury in Leo, and it's in direct opposition to Saturn. So, Natasha, a lot of those things, well, specifically, what resonated was just like the disconnect between the ascendant and the ascendant ruler and how they can't see each other. And what I found is that there has to be like some sort of trust in the ascendant ruler that it can get to where it needs to go. And we're gonna get into this later about like the nautical metaphor, but it's like putting trust in the steersman that like he or she, whatever, like or whomever can like get you on the right path or stay on the right path. But it was pretty validating. It was pretty cool just for when I first got into astrology, learning about the rising sign, learning about the ascendant ruler, and seeing that that the ascendant is the most personal part of your chart, right? It's like the ascendant like has everything to do with you. Like all the other parts, yes, they're parts of your life and parts of your experience, but the ascendant has everything to do with you. So it was pretty cool looking into that, and it provided a lot more nuance, just to astrology in general. And I feel like this is a personal opinion. I feel like if people were just to understand the um ascendant and the ascendant ruler and reflect on it a little bit, they would grow a lot more appreciation of astrology in general. Because astrology gets a, you know, it gets a bad rap a lot of the time because it's like, oh, the sun sign, we're born in the same month or we're born, but like we're not the same. Well, if you look at the ascendant and the ascendant rule, like something that's a lot more personal, then it kind of does make a lot of more sense that like, yes, you can be born in the same month, but your ascendant ruler and your rising sign or whatever is in completely different places, right? But yeah, like I was saying, Natasha, it was interesting how we have pretty similar rising signs and stuff like that. And I also do have Jupiter in my first house. So I have Jupiter in Virgo as well. And it's a very contradicting placement because
Hmm.
Jupiter likes to expand and then Virgo's, ruled by like Virgo and Mercury are closely tied together. And Mercury wants to pick things apart.
It's almost like I see that tension, like Tawa, you have the ascendant, opposition the moon, but then, I'm seeing these tensions as well with between you and Tosh and Brett, like with the like Jupiter, Mercury, like oppositions, with those ruling planets in your chart. So that's yeah. It paints a bigger picture. It just adds depth or like dimension to like when we're looking at a chart and seeing it, seeing the characteristics. It's not just your it's not your just your sun sign or your but it's not just your ascendant either. There's a lot, there's a lot more going on there than and it's very personal to each very specific to each person based on the aspects that it's making.
100%, 100%. And Brandon, my question, like, how do you see that, and how do you see that tension with Jupiter in the first, having a Virgo first
Ruled
house?
descendant.
Yeah, yeah,
Virgo ruled first house.
yeah, or Mercury ruled first house. My bad.
Um, oh, for me,
Yes.
are you speaking for me or for
Oh no,
just?
when you're talking about Natasha and I, like
Oh,
when you're
yeah.
saying you like see the tension.
Yeah. I mean, by nature in the theme of Moon Day, the Jupiter and Mercury are opposites. Like
Hmm.
they are the other side of each other's coin, if you will. So I feel like just when you're having those planets or having those aspects in your chart like just creates a little bit more tension, creates that, like Natasha, you were saying, just like the push and pull between, maybe, wanting to know more information and then just wanting to relax and expand. Might be a good way to put it. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
hear you. I hear you.
Yeah.
And you know what's what I also, excuse me, what I also like to look at too is the decans. And so I think it like provides a lot more detail to your ascendant, and your ascendant ruler is when you just like look at the like which part of the sign that it's in. I think it can give like a pretty cool overarching like character description of like um personality, psyche, like things like that. Because that's like a lot what the first house and the first house ruler is, right? Like it has everything to do with you. So I think it's a cool thing to look at.
Yeah.
So Rhiannon, tell us about your Pisces ascendant.
So I feel so I'm thinking about this as we're all talking, and I feel like mine's an aversion. So like I'm Pisces rising, my ascendant ruler is Jupiter, my eighth. So the eighth house is like Natasha was saying, like you don't see it as much. And so I mean, my very first just like low hanging fruit thought there is that there have been so many times where I feel like I get just having that Jupiter, my ascendant ruler in the eighth, there's a lot of almost like karmic reckoning that I've had in my life, and I feel like I did never see it coming. Like I don't, and there's been a lot of times where I've just been like in dire straits and have been saved, like by
Mm.
the most like craziest circumstances. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like as I'm thinking about it and now I'm like, that's it. that's what's always been there. Like I know like it's really easy just to say, oh, Jupiter's the lucky planet. But as far as that, I mean, it happens to be 1 degree away from my sun, so it's combust. Jupiter is.
Mhm.
So I don't feel like I can always see it, even from that aspect as well. So I also happen to have a huge lineup in my eighth house of planets. So I have my sun is there, Saturn is there, which I haven't really thought about
Mm.
much. Well, as you guys are talking about having Saturn like sitting there, with your um like in your first house and that, how that's sitting there with my ascendant ruler, I'm just like kind of piecing together like what that means for me, like that slowing down, stopping, always stopping myself, always questioning, always thinking like what like
Mhm.
um and yeah, Jupiter, Saturn, um Sun, and Pluto, actually. They're all
Sheesh.
sitting there in the eighth house. Yeah. So I feel like it's hard for me to see it,
Mhm.
like I don't, I, I have a hard time with it, like actually just even grasping it. But if I reflect on it, like, we're doing today, then it's easier for me to, okay, that makes sense. It's, I don't know if that breaks it down, if that answers your
Mhm.
question, but yeah.
I think it's interesting that you've said that like so much of your, or at least the way that I heard you, so I could be wrong, but so much of your self-discovery of or like understanding your ascendant, which is descriptive of who you are as a person, has come through karmic sort of stuff, which of course is all eighth house themed stuff. So it's
Hmm.
interesting that even though it's an aversion and there's no direct sight between the ruling planet of your ascendant and your ascendant, the way the influence is getting to you is it's like it's using eighth house themes as its vehicle, so to speak,
Mm.
to
Yeah.
access you
Mhm.
because it doesn't have
Mhm.
the ray of light to access. It's thematically accessing you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I
That's
think,
awesome.
yeah, that is really cool, Tawa. One thing I wanted to say just about like the ascendant versus how we, can potentially just look at our charts as like our sun sign, or like, I think the using the sun sign is just a much more linear perspective, whereas when you look at the ascendant, the whole chart becomes multidimensional because you are seeing like where you come in, like the helm of the ship, as we were saying, like what drives you, what fills in your personality, like the lens in which you see your sun, your purpose, and your backdrop, your moon, like coming in, how that plays out. I feel like that just lights up the whole chart. It also, I mean, not to mention it gives you descriptions of your houses and places your planets in those houses with aspects. You could, like, from there you can take the aspects between, the different houses and put them together. So when we're just looking at our sun sign, we don't have that. We don't have that level of depth to, really analyze our charts and use it to understand ourselves a little bit better. Like you were saying, Tosh, like it really is a wild ride when you start recognizing like the ascendant and how that like shapes, how that shapes how everything sits in your chart in the different houses, and how they express themselves through through those houses. So
Mhm.
Did you
Yeah,
oh
sorry, go
sorry.
ahead.
Um I may have missed this random. Did you say that
mhm.
Saturn is in Libra as well?
Yeah, if Saturn at 14 degrees Libra. Yeah.
Mm. So you have an
Mhm.
exalted Saturn in that eighth house.
I sure do. Yeah.
So very it's like, and you know, obviously we like do this and like I don't know you that well, so like whatever. But like um it's like it seems like because there's, and I think Tawa was talking about this, and maybe even you said this, but it seems like because there's also an aversion to your first house, your ascendant ruler, kind of like Natasha and I were talking about too. Um, it's like you almost like have to use everything else in your chart at your disposal to like gain more understanding of like what your rising sign um
Mm.
uh tells you about yourself, or you know, your dharma, even so to say, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's, at
I
least
like
to me,
that. I think
that's kind of like how I look at it. Because I'm like, if I can't see the first house, then like we got to work with what we got. So this Mercury
yeah.
Saturn thing that's going on, like this is all I got. This is what I got to work with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like just for me personally.
You guys have left things that my brain wants to chew on now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Well, maybe that's a good point to end with just, all of us having some good things to chew on. I'm sure it will give us some good ideas as to what we want to talk about next.
Yes, yes, yes. Excuse me. Yeah, does anybody have anything else to say before we head out? Cool. All
No,
right.
just
Well,
stay safe and keep out.
for
Yeah.
real though, for real.
Yeah.
I appreciate everybody, and whoever's listening, and we will see y'all next time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.